another Wednesday show on Broadcast Team Alpha, where we have fun bringing you cutting edge conversations while exploring the quantum possibilities. And this is the Wednesday show. There's nothing too serious going on, but there's a whole lot of interesting stuff going on tonight. I'm going to let Aage tell you that. But first, I'd like to invite you to connect with us. Connect with us on broadcastteamalpha.com. Connect with us on our YouTube channel. Thank you so much. We hit the 2,000 subscriber mark. So if you want to be part of bringing us toward the 3,000, would be so grateful. And you may notice that there's a new function in the YouTube chat room. It's called Super Chat. So if you'd like to support us in that way, we would be very grateful. Either way, we're so happy you're here with us. And Aage, I'm so excited to be here with all you guys. Tell us what's going on.
Oh, this is going to be so much fun. We have two gentlemen with us here today that has very extensive background in UFO research and free energy research also. And we have Dan Willis here, and the picture behind him, I want him to explain a little bit about later on, because it is such a history-making picture. And also we have Dr. J, which has got his own radio show, a global radio show, and there we go.
That's right.
And, he also, I want him to also tell us where we can connect with him later on. So what we're going to do for starters maybe is to talk a little bit about, it seems like UFOs and the extraterrestrial presence and issues are hitting mainstream here shortly. And we want to see, what are your opinions on how this will happen? Is disclosure one way or the other will happen? And maybe also discuss how will it happen. So, gosh, I don't know which one of you want to start this one out, but I'll give you the ball to both of you.
Well, first, I just want to say welcome. I want to say hi to Tom, hi Aage, hi to everybody in the chat room.
I too would like to say hello.
Yes, hello. Hello, Zon.
Hello, Dan, Dr. J.
Yeah,
this is so good. It is so good to have you guys. You know, this is really a very important topic. And because all of a sudden there seems to be a sea change. It's like, okay, wait a minute. I want to kind of, did I just notice something? Somebody else noticed something too. So the whole crux of what we want to talk about tonight is this whole mainstreaming of ufology. It seems like all of a sudden now it's like no big deal. It's the new normal. What do you guys think?
Well, you know what, Dan, if you don't mind, I'll take this quick. First of all, every major cable network, okay, Destination America, which never talked about UFOs or paranormal, Travel Channel, right? They're dumping big money into UFO shows on top of History, Nat Geo, Discovery, and everything else that's already been in their play. But, you know, there's all sorts of new reports that have been out. My brother gave me a New York Times or New York Post article that said that even though the Pentagon officially said they stopped investigating in 1969, well, they were lying, because now they admitted that they have been investigating the entire time, and yet they said they stopped in 2012. Other sources say they're still investigating.
Yeah, and they've been doing, not just them, every agency that's got anything going on with the air or the space, they've been researching this for a long time.
So I'm just going to jump in really quick, because I have a feeling I'm going to just be in the chat room when you guys get going. So many of our guests told us, right, gave us way in advance warning that disclosure was coming, right? John D'Souza, Randy Kramer, and others. And they said that they kind of didn't, commit to how it would be, but many people alluded to the fake alien invasion. But I'm saying, People Magazine, I don't think that's so soft. Maybe it's not hard like an alien invasion, but boy, it's like medium disclosure, right?
Well, let me get Dan's opinion first, because I want to throw one more thing into the mix too.
Oh, I have so much to say on this. I don't want to occupy the whole show.
That's why you're here, Dan. You're here for that reason. Okay.
I have so much to say on this. It was a lot of suspicious activity going on there. If you notice on the UFO community, there's a lot of people, a lot of conflict going on, and appears to be different potential agendas going on. If you look at what happened back in the mid-50s with Operation Mockingbird, and you have all the long list of all the mainstream media outlets, including the History Channel and the rest of them, they don't put anything out unless there is, there's a purpose for it. And when they came out in, I think it was December 16, 2017, with the Tic Tac, with the Nimitz incident, it went across, when I went to Washington to testify in 2001, we were talking about bases on the other side of the moon, 57 different species, nukes being shut down. All this was exposed, but, CNN and all the mainstream medias effectively did a limited hangout and sanitized it completely. But now, they want everybody, even your grandmother, to know about UFOs. They're saturating it across all the media. And let's see, then in May of this year, New York Times, the Navy is now allowing to do the reports. And you look at the people behind some of this, Tom DeLonge, and you look at some of the WikiLeaks emails, such as John Podesta writing about our secret plan that is forwarded email to the DNC people, and he also tweeted Podesta about not securing the disclosure on the UFO files. There is a whole connection that's with the Air Force that's a little different than what the Navy is doing, and we know for a fact there's human rights abuses being done. This is why executive orders have been put into place. And these operations have been deep underground, hundreds of bases deep underground. We have Antarctica as well.
Dan, you and Dr. J both. Right now, people are kind of wondering, in fact, there's people in the chat room are kind of wondering, based on all of this that's going on right now, people are having difficulty about who to trust and who to believe. What's your feeling about some of these disclosures, so to speak, that is happening with Tom DeLonge and these guys that he's got who used to be ex-government? What's the story on the Tic Tac footage? What do you think about that Tic Tac footage?
Okay,
and Project Bluebeam also.
And
the whole thing with Tom DeLonge had a meeting with Dr. Michael Salla, Dr. Robert Wood, who worked with William Tompkins, who was at the meeting. And as soon as William Tompkins started to talk to Tom DeLonge about the Navy secret space program, understand that the general of the Air Force, let's see, what's his name? William Castland, he's the commander at Wright-Patterson, where they used to have the reverse engineering operations. He got up and walked away. Why would you walk away when you have a Navy witness that has enormous amounts of documentation? You have Admiral Hugh Webster supporting him. You have all this stuff. Why would you walk away? It appears there's different agendas, and one of the agendas is to come out with what's called a limited disclosure. In other words, they're going to, look at this, but we're planning on making these anti-gravity craft, but you know what? There was the patents have been released already.
What about the patents that were seized? Because I know thousands have been seized about anti-gravity.
Well, there's one triangular spacecraft that was patented published in 2006, and the Navy just came out as of December 4th of 2018 of an advanced anti-gravity aircraft design that has mass canceling effect. I mean, they've already got this stuff. This stuff, they're putting it out into the patents for people to look at. It's not like we have to develop. They've already got the technology. So it's very suspicious that there's a limited hangout, and I believe a lot of it has to do with hiding a lot of the criminal human rights abuse activity in order to steer the narrative in such a way as to hide all this and push it down the roadaways. That's just my take.
Or do you think perhaps that maybe some of it being exposed, the shiny object, will allow people to see that over here, but we don't want you to see the dark side over here. Don't be looking over here. There's a happy exploration of space going on over here.
Exactly,
but
Tom.
we don't want you to know about this other dark stuff that's going on. But see, we still have not got solid sources. I mean, there's some great stories and lore out there. I was going to ask this tonight. What do you guys think is the best way for people to kind of sift through a lot of what's coming out right now?
I'll tell you how. The technology, right? Look at the 80s. We thought that was the pinnacle of the Industrial Revolution. I mean, you had VCRs, the first camcorders, and now when we compare technology to then, I mean, it's crap. It is so primitive. And if you think about what Philip Corso said in Day After Roswell, how he was given alien artifacts and an unlimited budget to see these technologies in companies like IBM. And these companies, obviously, the money goes to defense first, and then it trickles down to us. This, I think, is the best way to get us to disclosure. Why? Because if we have all these fancy devices, just like Dan said, the anti-gravity craft, well, then when we start seeing theirs and ours are somewhat similar, people are not going to be as shocked.
You're saying it'll reduce the shock effect?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's quite possible. It's plausible.
But we got to also remember that somewhere in the midst of it all, we have disinformation. So we probably also should look a little bit at the credibility of the people coming forward with the information. Even though they may look credible or sound credible, look at their background, see maybe a little bit about what they have done and where they come from. Like Tom DeLonge now, I had questions about him, really bad questions about him for quite a while, until very recently, actually, because he's basically saying that, yeah, I come from that arena over there where everything was secret, but I've broken with them. I don't care. I'm going to tell the truth. So
well, you know, and to the whole question too, Aage, about those people, these guys all retired recently from the very agencies that were covering up a lot of this information. So that makes them a little suspect to a lot of, quote, truthers who are saying, wait, DeLonge's in bed with government disinfo agents, and yet we don't know that totally to be true or not. These guys seem to be kind of forthcoming. They seem to be good-spirited. But is that just good cover? Or do you think that it's an honest reveal that these guys are bringing out for Tom DeLonge?
I select to believe that he's actually either in bed with the government still, and the government like him to bring it forward, or he's just saying
he's got the capability. He's got millions of fans, you know. Yeah. So he's the right person. You know, pick a movie star, or rock star, someone who's into this topic. I mean, you guys know I've interviewed Jack Osborne a couple times. He really wanted to put a lot of money into this as well, but it looks like Tom DeLonge beat him to the front. Yeah.
Amazing.
So can I just jump in? I have to do a shout out to the chat room. Thank you, Margaret Parker. She gave us a $5 super chat, you guys. Thank you so much. And Nancy's here, and Desmond Techie is here, and Lars Saturn is here. And
Lars.
Yeah. He's singing praises of you. Joey Boomer. Yay. So thank you, everybody. Forgive me if I missed you. Some of the questions are about disinformation, and somebody was watching a show that was saying good.
What do you think, Dan? What do you think about Tom DeLonge? I mean, do you think this is a legitimate effort on his part? Or do you think he's just being used as a tool?
Do I have my stealth cloaking device on? Wait. Okay. As long as I don't. Go ahead.
My take on it, you know, reading the People magazine article, you know, with DeLonge saying about the CIA and the DIA, these guys are national heroes and everything, and there's always this language of threat. You know, there's the advanced advanced aerospace threat identification program. You know, that there, and then we have Luis Elizondo, who cites excessive secrecy, concern about the Department of Defense wasn't treating these unidentified aerial phenomena like the national security threat he believes them to be. You know, and there's all these people, and they're working hand in hand with the mainstream media, which has a long infamous history of working with, you know, the Bilderberg group and everything else, you know. And so there's this threat thing. And, you know, if you look back at the history of the alien threat situation, goes all the way back to 1967, where LBJ put a secrecy order on the report from Iron Mountain, where they were planning on contriving a threat from outer space. And then Werner von Braun's deathbed testimony talked about the last card being the alien threat. This is after terrorists and everything. And then in 2016, you have the Benson Strategy Group trying to save the Hillary Clinton campaign with a number of different scenarios. And it was like 38%, I believe, to create an alien threat using, the holographic stuff. And so that they've had this fake alien invasion thing for some time. But, we revealed that in 2001, the National Press Club. But you'd think, that they would give that one up. But, just the word threat, it seems to keep coming up a lot with the, DeLong group.
Yeah, it's the fear.
Fear, yeah.
Fear keeps people in track.
Well, it's interesting what you said, though, is that here, these people seem to have this in with mainstream media. Poof, on People magazine. Isn't that a charming article? Very nice. Very nicely framed. It's got such a nice, happy feel to it. It fits the whole People narrative. It's like a new normal has occurred. And so you ask yourself, well, wait a minute, why didn't they quote somebody else? Why didn't they quote Dr. Greer, who's been at it longer? Why didn't they quote yourself or somebody else? All of a sudden, now DeLong's got the spotlight again. Is it because he's buying access through these people, or through his quote celebrity? That's what's buying him this top tier access. What do you think
that's
is?
A key point, Tom. It's not that he has an in with the mainstream media. Is that the people that he's working with, these Air Force generals and whatnot, that are feeding him? They could be playing him. I don't know. It's just kind of suspicious that if he's really an inquiring mind and understanding the UFO phenomenon, the secret space program, he would have listened to William Tompkins rather than standing up and walking out. It almost seems like that's not his program. His program is the Air Force. And so, there's this grouping of, like you mentioned, Dr. Stephen Greer, and there's a whole bunch of other people that are in this kind of group where all extraterrestrials basically are benevolent. They're including the Vatican, who is saying, ET is our brother, but I think they're positioning themselves to maintain their power structures, in case disclosure comes out. Many documents, MJ12 documents, of, they've been trying to keep containment on this ever since the 1940s. And so you've got a group that's talking about threat, and another group that's warning, this other groups are going to come out with stuff. And then you've got, and you have the other secret space program group, which is a whole nother animal in itself. And you've got, Dolan and others, they're attacking with that,
That's why I'm saying it's trying to figure out who to believe with all these people. Some of these stories are so phantasmagorical. It's my own word, but they're so fantastic. You're like, wow. I really love the Corey Good stuff. The Corey Good material, I love it. I love it.
Don't believe anybody. Do your own research.
I know, but I'm just saying, it's such great material.
Richard Doty was there to debunk. He was a counterintelligence officer. And recently he started giving interviews talking about ETs. And I said, what made you start talking about them when your whole job was to defraud people and make them think it's something else? And he said, well, because of his job when he was in the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, and he was supposed to go to, or he was going to every event and read through all the books of all the lecturers and researchers. He said they're all half right, but they're all half wrong. And he wanted to set the record straight. And that's one thing that I think that's confirmation from the other side. And let me add this to Tom DeLong too, by the way. Hope he's not really seeing this because he's not a very nice man on the phone. But Joe Rogan basically destroyed him in the interview because Tom DeLong couldn't say anything. He's like, well, I can't tell you this, or I can't answer that, or I can't say this. Well, what gives? What gives? What are you going to contribute? Why the hell did they give him the Researcher of the Year award? Why? Because 2 Department of Defense videos came out. Well, how was he instrumental in DOD releasing that? I don't think he was at all. And to the Stars Academy, that's more money for him to make money. He's got a novel Okay, not a book on research, a novel. It's got a movie, right, with actors. Then he's gonna have a documentary. It's like, why do you want to mix fiction and crap when we're talking about truth? So I don't want to stick it to him because I was a fan of his music, but when I started talking to him to get him on my show, I hate to say it, but he was an asshole.
It's almost like he's carving his own niche in this whole ufology thing. It's his own corner that doesn't seem to be aligned with the others. You have the last probably 30 years of the whole current crop of the big contact in the desert seminar list. Those people are like the seniors, and some of those people are getting old now. They're dying off. Some of these are longtime researchers have been doing this for like Jim Mars. You had others.
Jim Mars is dead, but Eric von
right.
Däniken, right? He's in his 80s, 86.
So,
is the last time I spoke to him. I mean, they're gonna die off, like you said.
Is this a cycle? Maybe there is a. Do you think maybe the ETs are waiting for that to kind of go away? Now there's a whole new paradigm coming forward. The millennials will accept more so than people of my generation or younger, or even yours.
Get this into this. Right now, we're celebrating the 75th anniversary of D-Day. So you have all these, a handful of World War II vets. 300 of them are dying a day. A 97-year-old even made a jump, a skydiver. He was one of the paratroopers in Normandy. The point is, if you go back to 1945 and you saw something and you reported it to the Air Force and they told you to shut up, you were a patriot and you shut up. But I think that generation is dying off. And when it's finally time for our generation to take the reins of it, you ask any kid in high school whether he believes aliens are real or are visiting us. I've never, ever heard him no. I mean,
exactly.
There's
no,
not
that's
very
a new
many
normal.
skeptics,
right.
You know, within teens right now, or even early 20s.
Totally agree. Absolutely.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. You know that I testified, in Washington, the top secret clearance, but most Navy guys and like Tom, if we see, a USO coming out of the ocean, there's this publication, the JANUP 146, that, you've got like 10 years in prison and $10,000 fine or whatever it is.
10, yeah.
But, the Navy has reversed this. This policy goes back to 1954, incidentally, when the Bilderberg started, with the Nazi SS. But, they started putting the clamp down on anybody talking about, and when you realize that, I thought it was like a special event, when I was taking messages from ships of extraterrestrial craft coming out, or whatever they were, German or American, coming out of the ocean going 7,000 miles per hour back in 1969. More than half of all of the UFO sightings on the planet are going in and out of the ocean. Obviously, there must be bases deep underneath the ocean. And so, you have, I'm looking, I did researched afterward, and there's like thousands and thousands of these reports. And so, this is common, but
it's happening daily.
Sailors can't talk about it.
Well, see, this is the blurring. Now, here's the blurring of that. Think about that. The blurring is what you just said. And now you have people like Corey Good talking about these underground cavernous cities, and people, and these people have interdimensional spacecraft that go right through the walls of the caverns to wherever they want to go. And so maybe these are those same people. That's why I think it almost lends credence to some of his stories. He's like, well, okay, well, that's logical. That kind of makes sense. And yet again, we still don't have any solid evidence. But it's what helps. I think those are the things, the previous lore or the previous established stories about this kind of stuff, or witness encounters, experiences, lends credence to some of these other stories. And I'm not sure if that's a good thing or bad thing.
And it's coming from multiple witnesses too. They see these, like the one report, my dad was on the USS Coral Sea, where the craft went right into the mountainside. They can shift their densities.
And they also talk about the beings themselves, right? How they're translucent, and how half of them is here and half of them is literally in another dimension.
And I think that whole concept of interdimensionality or multiple dimensions is becoming more acceptable now too. I don't think we heard near as much a couple of years ago, 3-4 years ago. You didn't hear near as much. It was kind of like, is starting.
Interstellar, intergalactic was it was 20 years ago. Now
Right.
it's more
Multidimensional,
Yeah.
interdimensional, multidimensional. The concept, I remember Greer broaching this one, and others, I'm sure it wasn't just him, talked about how that this was a great little moment, a little sidecar that he mentioned one time, that they don't fashion their ships out of factories and production lines. It's that it's imagined on the spot to what they need, and then they take it and it goes. And you're like, okay, we are ants.
Right.
We are just
Yeah.
ants.
Well, I think so that I think
Yeah.
also that it'll be a little easier to understand once we start figuring out what we are and what is the environment around us. It's made up by electrons, particles, protons, and photons, and just particles. But I am also made up of those particles. And those particles that quantum physics talk about can be seen and observed and seen in two different places at the same time, which means if I'm made of the same particles, I can do the same thing. I can travel through walls also, because these particles can, if I know how to control that with my mind. And that is what ET is doing. Like this big ship that crashed in Helgoland back in I think it was in the early 60s. They found a very large ship up there, but there were no engine.
Wait, do you mean Russia? The one in Russia?
No,
The giant
Helgoland Island out in the North Atlantic.
Oh, okay.
And there were no engine in it, and there were just one chair in a room up front where evidently they were flying it from, and there were no instrument panel. It was flown by mind technology.
That's right. When the training report back in the 40s, came out, and they couldn't find any levers, meter switches, or anything to control the craft. It's all consciousness interface.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the
Bob
DIA
Lazar even
came
mentioned
out
that,
with.
remember? Bob Lazar even mentioned that, as a matter of fact, that there are no instruments on the sports model craft that he was working on. Nothing, not like you said, not a button, not a lever, not a steering wheel, absolutely nothing. It's controlled with your mind only.
Yeah.
Some even say it's like a crown almost that you put on, and then you are, the craft is almost like biological. It's almost like living itself, but it's controlled exactly. You want it to go up, it's going to go up.
The whole discussion behind Otis Carr, you guys are familiar with that whole story with Otis Carr and his development of the OTC, his anti-gravity craft. He figured it out with his contra-rotating platters and electromagnetics. So he figured it out. And I remember working a little bit with Ralph Carr on his website and stuff. And it's like everybody keeps asking him, okay, wait, yeah, all that consciousness stuff. Yeah, okay, fine.
Ralph Ring, you mean?
But how does, Ralph Ring. And it's like, they're all like, how does it work? How does it work? How does it work? Yeah, but it's consciousness. Yeah, but we don't want to know that. We want to know, how does it work? How does it work? And so this is the era that we've kind of moved into now, is acknowledging that that's the key component to an advanced civilization, that they've bypassed a lot of these layers that we have in front of us that are all analog and push button. We think our digital is all that, and it's not. It's very antiquated compared to what they have.
Well, Tesla, who gave Otis Carr the information.
Right, exactly.
The one. Tesla was from Croatia. Another lady was also from that, called Maria Orsic, who was getting these channel designs that Professor Schumann found viable physics, and they were able to create anti-gravity craft. For both the Viral craft and the OTC-1, both were operated, and Tesla and Maria Orsic were both sharing notes. And they were both operated by consciousness, and where you could direct the craft with your intention. And the Defense Intelligence Agency, they came out with 2 documents that got released. One was on warp drives, another one's on wormholes. So this stuff is leaking out into the public.
And what is faster than speed of light? Speed of thought. That's the fastest thing there.
Because it's outside of space-time. It's not a part of space-time.
That's right.
That's the revelation. A lot of people are finally getting, kind of figuring out, okay, wow. That's the wow moment.
Yeah. Well, when you understand everything is consciousness, as Aage was pointing out, like an interview I did with Emery Smith, you have to get the DNA of the pilot to match with it, the craft is actually living, and it has a DNA too, and you get the symbiotic relationship where it's in extension of the pilot's will to interface with the craft to direct the craft. And so this is the technology that is so far we've been in this technological retarded bubble for over 70 years, while these this breakaway civilization, as some people call it, have advanced in medical and space and everything you can imagine across the board.
So, okay, so let's go back to the OP, if you will. The main point of the whole show was this mainstreaming of ufology. So maybe the whole story about what they are and where they may or may not be from. They're from so and so and so and so, and they come from here to do this, and they've abducted all these people. So that era is now moving towards this whole new narrative is now, yeah. By the way, we have a whole secret space program going on. Do you think that there's going to be more layers unraveled of that to add to the previous canon of lore that we've all become used to?
I'm hoping Trump's space agency comes out, soon, because you know what? A lot of people, when I was in Hawaii and I was talking to, was it, come on, you guys fill me in, Michael Sala, yeah. And he was saying that right there, that's like the gateway to introducing us to, hey, what's really out there. That's that good way to cover both the secret space agency and also to merge what's been happening with the secret space agency and have an open military agency. Now, we know the military is always going to have secrets, but once you see things going in and out of space all the time, you're going to become accustomed to it. Just like you see planes flying overhead, it won't be such a wow thing anymore.
Well, Michael Schratt, we interviewed him. God, it's been 6-7 months ago. We interviewed Michael Schratt, and he's this guy that's done a lot of research into these triangular craft and a lot of unusual craft. That it seems, based on the evidence that he's gathered, a lot of it's our own military. That these are using super cool, like the little puck you see in these videos that goes around the table, using the same principle to levitate these giant craft. So some of it may be our own, and so I guess maybe that's, like you say, the Space Force may be a cover for that, and they'll announce a great breakthrough in levitation through superconductors or something like that. Maybe that'll be part of that. Who knows?
I think that, just like Dan was saying here a little while ago about all these inventions and the patents that was issued for anti-gravity systems, you can know that if the military or somebody in the military is applying for a patent, they're working on it. Otherwise, they wouldn't apply for a patent. So when they have the system, and I am a patent holder, I know that you don't get a patent unless you at least have it sound science in concept. Otherwise, you won't get a patent.
Ever since the Invention Secrecy Act in 1951, the Sensitive Application Warning System, of which I dealt with 10 years with inventors and trying to bring zero-point energy out, they have it. Number one on the list is anti-gravity, then is free energy, and anything that's over 20% efficient, on solar panels. So they've been keeping the secret with close to 6,000 national security orders. Anybody comes up with a anti-gravity solution, they can't share it with the public.
The patent is seized, like I was saying earlier. I mean, that's been happening at least for 2 decades. I mean, that I know of, and we know. I mean, this goes probably back to Tesla. Having his patent seized. They don't want us using anything that's not using fossil fuels, because there goes the oil industry.
Yeah.
So where do you guys think? What do you think, John? Where do you think ufology is heading with all of this?
Like I said, it's to the technology. I think it's to have less of a shock factor, because they could end it any moment they want. I'm not talking about the government. I'm talking about the ETs. They could just fly, in mass, just like in the movie Arrival. They have these giant motherships almost, but they have only like a couple aliens per, and they all land in strategic air places, like for instance China, Russia, I think Oklahoma or Montana was the US one, and they're all over around the world. They could do that any moment they want, but it seems to me, for whatever reason, they're just sort of staying still until we catch up to them. Now, if you look back historically, Native Americans, Mayans, Egyptians, it seems to me that they were having far more contact and seeing these things because they were building monuments, they were worshiping them, they were talking about the star people and the people from the sky, giving them, intelligence and how to farm and astronomy. But it sort of seemed to die out. But then it wasn't until we started detonating nuclear weapons, as Stanton Friedman, rest in peace again, said that, it's like the kids found the matches and they started coming back. But we are such a land of what shoot first, ask later. I don't know what some of the reasons are. I mean, is there a universal law that tells them that they can't interfere with our evolution?
Well, that was all part of what Roddenberry figured out through his ET contacts. Wes Bateman and a few other ET experiencers gave him accounts and thoughts and conveyed a lot of the information he used for the original Star Trek concepts.
Oh, that was being fed from Office of Naval Intelligence for Admiral Leslie Stevens through Leslie Stevens,
right?
Who was feeding it to Gene Roddenberry on the Outer Limits set.
And Tom, you also mentioned last week, if you recall, that you mentioned that Star Trek was talking about going to planets before. What's the new Star Trek talking about? Dimensions.
Yeah, they're doing interdimensional. They're doing the cosmic web. They're talking time travel, more loops, more crazy time travel. Yeah. Seems to be a very common theme now in the whole franchise.
Notice it was Admiral James T. Kirk, not General James T. Kirk. Navy.
In the Navy, yeah.
Yeah, they carried on a lot of the crazy Navy philosophy in that show that, They've dropped a lot of that, though, in the more recent stuff. Seems like they've become more of a kind of a twisted United Nations kind of thing.
I want your opinion, too, on how do you think disclosure will happen? Because we know it's going to happen. But what do you expect to see first? What do you think, how will it progress into the point where it is commonly accepted that, okay, they're out there and they're here?
I'm saying, this language, this threat language with this limited hangout, so to speak, with Tom DeLonge and To the Stars Academy, and which is being pushed by the mainstream media, this whole thing. But I kind of agree with Dr. Michael Salla. I've just got his latest book about the Air Force changing alliances, because it goes back to the Air Force, along with the industrial military complex and the corporations. And the Nazis basically got into an alliance with the Draco. And the Navy, on the other hand, had developed far advanced technology, far superior to the Draco from the Nordics. And so they've got the Solar Warden program, which, Gary McKinnon hacked into the computers and discovered, the
non-terrestrial ships. That's right.
And
non-terrestrial ships. I couldn't believe that. That was a huge breakthrough with Gary McKinnon did.
The Dr. Sala's attitude is that, they're going to come out with all this stuff, this limited information without the full story. But you know what? It's the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth is eventually going to come out, because you got these operations. And a lot of indications of that, that back in 1955, when Eisenhower lost control to this whole group, that he tried to warn about the misplaced powers and unwarranted influences.
Do you mean this was right? Because he met them. He met, I believe, it was 2 or 3 species at what is now called Edwards Air Force Base, but at the time Muroc, and I think that was 52. And something happened because I think the treaty that was meant for us to give up nuclear weapons, of course, our generals, didn't want to.
It was February 1955 when that whole thing came down, and he lost control. And he knew that, and when they set up a whole new MJ-12 operation with Alan Dulles, of all people, as MJ-1, the infamous Nazi infiltrator, what happened was he set up a secret marine intelligence unit that would come active in the future if this group ever got crazy. And we have QAnon coming out. Now we have,
QAnon,
today we
yeah.
have over 100,000 sealed indictments. And you look back at, 2017 executive order for human rights abuse and corruption, which is anybody in the cabal, changes the Uniform Code of Military Justice so these people can be tried under military law. You've got Guantanamo Bay expanded. And just now, in the news, you see the declassification of these FISA memos, and John Huber has 470 investigators under him, that all the stuff that they've dug out. So this is kind of like walking on eggshells with the media, how to spin and control this whole thing as it starts to unveil the dark crime families that have been operating our country for some time.
The world. Not just the country, the world, right?
Yeah, and so you've got human rights abuse that I can't even talk about on the show. It's so hideous going on in these operations. Slaves, you have 800,000 people a year being missing, that happen. And you've got, over 100, this is like back in the 80s, 130 deep underground military bases, and the stuff they're doing in Antarctica, from what I understand, is pretty hideous. And so, corporations, slave labor works great for the corporate bottom line, for the shareholders, so it's been going on.
They don't have to pay anything, they work around the clock, and they're expendable.
Yeah, Brigadier General Stephen Lovekin, when he was on Eisenhower's staff, said, he got sold out. He lost control to the corporations, the transnational corporations that, are controlled by these Bilderberg meetings that were set up by a former Nazi SS officer, So, you've got this, and you got these yearly meetings every single year where you got the big mover shakers of the media, and you've got the people of the big finance, the
royalty.
Basically,
you were in that movie. That movie just got released. Above Majestic. You were interviewed in that movie, and so these concept that the Third Reich never really went away. It just kept going. That to me was just kind of a mind boggler. I mean, I've heard a lot of this stuff about the Hannibals and the escape to Argentina, the escape to Antarctica. But then as the more you start to unravel all this, it's just they infiltrated with paperclip, and now the whole thing just keeps going.
I always argue that the Third Reich ended because that was the military invasion, and now the Fourth Reich.
Okay, so it doesn't matter. Third,
invasion.
Fourth, fifth, whatever you want to call it. It's just they never stopped. The whole thing just kept going.
No, keep going. Yeah.
When I testified in 2001, Operation Mockingbird, I didn't even know what it was. If I were to hear this stuff going on today, I wouldn't even believe it. But the trouble is the majority of the people, what everybody's been exposed to, the Rockefeller Foundation completely rewriting what actually happened at the end of World War II. They took out the whole Nazi infiltration, the Nazi escape, the whole connection with the banking elite. Alan Dulles set up Operation Mockingbird to control all the mainstream media, starting with 400 journalists. You've got the Invention Secrecy Act. You've got Hollywood with The Day That Stood Still, with Project Dove controlling media Hollywood. So the Nazis had this plan called Weltanschauungskrieg, which means worldview warfare. They planned to infiltrate in, which they did, and also into the pharmaceutical corporations and the head of it. You have to think about the eugenics programs and things. Anyway, they have completely created a matrix of perception that all of us have been born into and indoctrinated through our school, our television, our movies. And so all this stuff sounds like a very bizarre science fiction movie. And because of its very nature of being so out there, it keeps its own best secrecy from the average person.
It becomes so fantastic. Was it Hoover that said that about it being so fantastic you can't believe it, but it's true. He meant there's a famous quote. I have to dig that up, but Hoover talked about that. You're confronted with this reality that's so much greater than anything you've ever known that it's hard to wrap your mind around it.
When it comes to the level of disclosure, though, I want to look at Dan here, because behind him is a picture. I mean, even almost 20 years ago, how much closer to disclosure can you get than what's contained in that picture behind you, Dan? That was testimonies from top-ranking government officials to the fact that, yes, they're here.
Mhm.
Yeah, there is the picture.
Yeah, the Disclosure Project that you were part of, Dan, 2001.
Talk about that picture
the
for just
reason that whole thing came about is because what happened was Lawrence Rockefeller wanted to have disclosure. Clinton, the little old lady who sponsored the National Press Club event, Sarah McClendon, she asked why he hasn't disclosed this. And he says, well, Sarah, there's a secret government in the government and I don't control it. He tried to get his CIA director, James Woolsey, to get access. He was denied access, brought Stephen Greer into a meeting with them, brought a huge amount of information. And he said, I know the subject's real, trying to figure out why the hell I can't gain access to it. And he said, how can we possibly disclose what we don't have access to? And so he started collecting over 500 witnesses. By 1997, Dr. Greer met with Edgar Mitchell at the Pentagon and provided a National Reconnaissance Organization classified advisory of a meeting that I was actually involved with Bob Lazar back in the early 90s, that showed cosmic ops, magi ops. These are unacknowledged special access programs. He found they were real. When he found out they were real, he was told, sir, you do not have a need to know. And he said, the hell I don't. I'm the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And he said to Dr. Greer, quote, if you can get your people together and go before the media, you have my permission. This group is illegal, quote unquote. And so that's what greenlighted the May 9, 2001 National Press Club, where, we had just explosive testimony, 57 different species, bases on the other side of the moon, NASA are brushing the UFOs out, the astronauts told to keep quiet what happened on the moon. We had alien reproduction vehicles back in the 1950s. I mean, Nazi Germany had it in 1934. We didn't have anti-gravity until October of 1954. And then they just, right in the mid 50s, right in that time frame is when they shut everything down. That's right when the infiltration happened. And we've been kept at this state where we need nuclear power, coal, oil, for our energy sources, which
chemical
are
rockets
dangerous and obsolete.
The chemical rockets to go to space. It's so antiquated.
That's Chinese toys
I told you
from
that, yeah,
1,200 years ago.
Yes, yeah. We're still relying on these antiquated methods.
Right.
And calling
the cars. What about our cars? Yeah. Internal combustion. That goes back to the Chinese rockets. What are we doing? We're burning something in our cars to create,
but even bigger,
power.
though, the bigger problem, even bigger than that, is this consumption-based economies that we've created on this planet that are just devouring the planet.
That's true.
So Ruth Cormack said, I suspect that disclosure will only take place with parallel consciousness changes in humankind. This has been happening on a massive scale for years already. So that kind of dovetails into what I was going to ask about the human potential. Because if we're so behind and people are aliens or entities are governing spacecrafts with their mind or with a crown on, or it's part of their DNA, what can we do here and now to prepare for what's coming or improve our consciousness?
Well, the big short circuit is that we learn what our consciousness can do. We learn our superpowers, because that jumps everything. That jumps our technology. That jumps whether we use what kind of spacecraft. It jumps all of that.
Yeah, I think people need to understand what we're talking about is extremely real. They need to do the research. It was back when 2014. I had, what you have to do is you have to look at hundreds of witness testimonies. You look at the authenticated documents that come out. You put a chronological timeline. Just start at the 1900s. If you go to thewebmatrix.net, I share my notes freely with everyone. And when you start putting this all together, the fact that there is not something going on is insane, so and it all has to do with consciousness, absolutely. And as we are becoming more awake and aware that these realities exist, the collective global mind is something that Facebook and Google can't censor with their algorithms.
It's true. But yet, what's today's biggest story that I woke up to? YouTube is taking down thousands and thousands of videos and channels, more censoring. It's like, what are we turning into, China, North Korea?
They have to control the narrative. It's perception management. Snowden leaked, like GCHQ, they've got the trolls, shills, sock puppets, and all this. They've been desperate. They are desperate, deleting channels and calling it hate speech, or trying to figure out something to, to censor all these people that are pointing out
it's maintaining the status quo.
Know.
We got to keep everybody what we've been. Just go back to your TV now. Just go back to Mama's Family or just ESPN,
CNN, New York Times.
Not even that. We don't want you reading. Don't be reading that, for Pete's sake. We need you to get over here to ESPN because we've got some great NFL coverage.
Sports, right? Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, don't even worry about that new stuff. That stuff's stressful. Don't even go there.
So I can't help but wonder. You were talking about all of Gitmo getting ready, and the what many of us who are knowing what's coming or hoping what's coming. How many people might be in Gitmo that we don't know about? And on the global stage, it's like a clone or somebody else. Is that possible?
Well, I could speak to this. I interviewed a CIA, a retired CIA officer who was one of the head honchos in the enhanced interrogation. And I used the wrong word when I said, if we know what's happening at Gitmo right now with the waterboarding and sleep deprivation and sensory deprivation, I said, what's really going on in CIA safe houses around the world? He goes, well, if it's safe houses, nothing's going on. He goes, but I can tell you, it's CIA black sites that you don't know what's going on. That's where I think stuff is really going on around the planet. If you want to kidnap someone and torture them, on somewhere that's not on American soil, there you go. CIA has a lot of little, black sites that we do not know of, that they are torturing round the clock. And
that's the problem, John, is we don't know if they are or they aren't. But we know that if they exist,
they exist. We know they exist.
The probability is high that some bad things are happening.
Yeah.
There's so much disinformation going out there, and so many conflicts. Everybody really needs to, really look at all the information, all the evidence, and people reveal themselves over time.
Well, what do you guys now, Dan? We've talked about this many times. You too, Dr. J. We talked about in light of all of this encompassing thing about whether we're ever going to get straight answers from anybody in authority, we doubt. Most of us, we're like, yeah, whatever. It's not coming from the top. So for the commoner out there, for the common person, we all know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So the whole thing then is personal disclosure, which involves things like the CE5, making contact in your own way through meditation. What are some thoughts that you guys have about that?
I think that's one of the only ways things are going to start to happen. And, first I mentioned the technology for less the Shaw factor. You have approximately 1 in 40 people being abducted that are finally talking they're not being thrown into, the crazy mill, asylums, puzzle factories. People are starting to believe them. And then you have people who are having contact through CE5 measures and protocols, and whether they like to use Greer's CE5 or their own. I know a couple here in Los Angeles who have pretty big followings, and they just go to parks and meditate, and things show up all the time. I mean, this is a very, very known phenomenon. There used to be Prophet Yahweh in Vegas, who was one of the only people who did this for the media. But this is happening on a daily basis around the world.
Yeah, and I tell you, there's a way to actually learn how to do that, because about 6 months ago, in Tucson there, I walked to the very south end of town, and it was dark out there, and it was a road that was facing east-west, and I was standing there looking to the south, and I went into a meditative state, and twice I had ships show up that flew and stopped right in front of me. They were not so close that I could see much for details, but they were big lights.
Silent
And
too, I
lights
guess,
did
right?
it, and it works. You can actually do that.
And you're talking about silent, right?
Yes, yes.
So that's really the only kind of, I think it's going to have to be, and you use the line all the time, Dr. J, in your show about, disclosure being in our own hands. I think that's the only way. But it does seem to be like the whole point of the whole show kind of wrapped back around that it's happening. It's becoming a mainstream topic that's no longer ridiculed, which I think is great. It just gives more opportunity for people to, what do they use? It's a safe place or a safe space. They can talk about it now without feeling like they, please don't commit me, you know. So
Now,
I think that
President Trump just met with the Prime Minister of Japan a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, somewhere in that frame, right? And they announced that they're going to put Japanese astronauts into space, but more importantly, on the moon. America and Japan and other international astronauts are going to be back on the moon publicly that we're going to know of in 2024. That's the new goal.
right, NASA just announced they were going to shift some money around because all of a sudden you've got other countries, India and China are heading to the moon. There's a big race on now for that.
That's right.
The resources.
Yeah. Well, what we have to watch out for is, since the mainstream media is taking full bore propagation of this information out there, is how it's going to be directed or spun into a particular narrative. It's important that everybody looks at, there's people that, believe the reptilians exist, so other people don't believe they exist. They're all good, and then you have other people that are 20 and back people, and you have all these different groups within the UFO community. What's important is that every individual looks at all of it, and what happens is if you have a resource of a lot of different information sources, it helps see through the mainstream narrative. It's, you start looking at the verbiage that's being used. You can see the direction that they're going. Anyway,
well,
that's
in the same light too, Dan, I totally agree. Because in the same light, as you begin to listen to witness testimony, you see people who put their careers, reputations on the line to tell a story that's so far out there, but they're willing to come forward with these stories or whistleblowing, whatever it is, because it is something that they experienced. And to just out and out dismiss it is no longer the commonplace. A lot of people are I think, more willing to accept something's going on.
Keep in mind, all these witnesses that I joined, which were 520 went before the mainstream media, each one of us stated we were willing to testify under oath, that's the penalty of perjury, also breaking national security oaths, before an open congressional hearing. But this was completely sanitized from the mainstream media, like CNN. It was like, oh, is there life on other planets? Some people think there is, And
you got to cue up the X-Files music every time they do that.
That's right.
Yeah. So, well, this has been great. Go ahead.
It's everywhere. And even me being a retired pilot, when I sat around pilot lounges in the years past, I got to talk to pilots, and about half of them, if you get them by themselves, they will admit that they have seen something that shouldn't be there in the sky.
More than half, as a matter of fact. As a skydiver, everybody who is flying planes at drop zones, they do it to get hours, because instead of paying to rent a plane, you're going to get paid $10, to get 20 minutes ride up and down. Pretty much, they want to do it. Yeah. There's always something going on in the skies. I mean, no matter where it is on this planet, whether it be in Dubai, whether it be in Zimbabwe and the UK, right above us right now in the US, I'm sure somewhere somebody right now is having a sighting. And let me say this, I always say this, I said this yesterday with Preston Daniel. If you're seeing a UFO, chances are it's going to or coming from an abduction.
Yeah.
Wow. Or that they may actually be part of that abduction.
Yeah, that's true.
Isn't that right? Isn't that generally what a lot of abductees say? Yeah, I saw a UFO and I don't remember what happened after that. you know.
Well, yeah, because their memory suppressed at that
Right.
point for
When I was in
shock
Jaime
factor.
Maussan in Mexico, I had a what was a 3-hour missing time experience with my friend. We
Ooh.
were coming back
Oh,
across the
wow.
border, and yeah, it was like weird. It was like I don't know what happened.
Well, you had your own experience, Dan, which is another show in and of itself. So
There
Yeah.
was a lot of people having experiences. A lot of people way past ET 101. They know they're here, and
so
it's
that's
just you have this huge population that's being manipulated by the mainstream media that we have to be the caretakers and kind of make sure thank God for alternative media while we're not being censored here. To get an alternative view on this whole thing.
Do you think
I
it's a
see
big
we're getting
MacGuffin?
close to the end of the show here. Hey, Nori, what's happening?
Hang on a second. I want to ask. Do you guys think that maybe this whole thing about the public's inability to handle it is just a red herring? That the public really is ready?
No, I think they are ready. Maybe when Orson Welles read the War of the Worlds radio broadcast 80 years ago, okay, sure, there was a lot more people that were very religious and very scared, and the technology then was very antiquated. But I think now, I think people can handle it. I really do.
Cool.
I think so too.
So the chat room is not ET 101. I mean, they're like high level conversation.
There's a lot going on in the chat room. I can see it.
Really
It's a lot going on. Wow,
really
you people have been busy.
You
Wow.
guys might all want to go back in and look at the chat because people have spoken to you during the night. I just have to comment on this. Ruth Cormick again said it could be that many ETs only exist as souls and lived on planets in physical form thousands of years ago before getting wiped out. I actually had a reptile jinn that burned its way out of my plexus.
Interesting.
Interesting, right?
I had someone who kept asking me this question. It says, please find out. There was this case of a masseuse giving a massage to someone in Colorado. And while this person is giving a massage, from the back, out comes this being, literally a gray being.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, how do we know that all of us here are not one of them?
That's true. That's true. Well, if you think about
I'm looking at Aage. I don't know.
I've read articles. There was a guy that wrote an article that talked about the human physiology is not really designed for this gravity point, that it's actually designed for a lighter gravity because people have all these back problems. You think about it. If you look at animals like your cats and dogs, they grow up. You look at a bulldog. He's all built. He looks like a little football player. Has he done a day of working out? None. Cats,
let me add this too.
Animals can bound up trees. We're the only species that cannot do like our primate cousins can, just bound up a tree like a chimpanzee. They just bound right up like they got anti-gravity. We have to go work out. We have to do all this extra effort. And there are those that are saying that our human physiology is not really engineered for this weight potential.
Let me throw this into the mix too. Is our circadian rhythm does not align to what our day Earth planet is, a 24-hour cycle. Right. It's actually closer to what a Mars day is like, right? And on top of that, if we were from here originally, don't you think that all the vegetables and all the other things would be more tasty? We'd be liking it more. We wouldn't have to smother it in cheese and all sorts of sauces just to make people eat it. I get the impression that we do not come from here. This may be our home now, but millions of years ago, it sure as hell wasn't.
My understanding is 100,000 extraterrestrials living among us that look very much like us, according to last interview I did with Emery Smith. He was briefed that there's 100,000 of them walking among us, which doesn't surprise me.
Me too. And also Timothy Good has had a couple of times where he's run into someone who is completely human. But he said if you, one case, it was, he said, if you are able to read my mind, if you're not from here, he goes, touch your right nostril with your, index finger. And immediately that being did so. You also have David Jacobs, who wrote the book Walking Amongst Us, his last book, unfortunately, which will probably be the last one he'll ever write because he's getting up there in years. He also said that in the last 20 to 30 years, most abductions, when they occur, that the hybrids have had so many cycles of hybridization that they look so human, and that each abductee was told to show these new hybrids basically how to live on Earth. So they were shown scenes of like a grocery store, and say, what do you do there? Or a front door of a house, like, what's this door? What's this knob?
You remember the old TV show, The Invaders? Now, most people, you can find it if you dig around on the internet. There's an old TV show called The Invaders, and it's about this guy who was a newspaper reporter.
David Vincent.
Yep, he became obsessed, and he figured out there was an alien invasion going on. And in one of the episodes is a training center, and they're doing exactly that, John. They're teaching them how to live among us. It was fascinating. We're talking the late 60s when this TV show, right around the same time frame early Star Trek came out. So you had two shows, one showing this ET invasion by using assimilation into society of these beings. And
that's what's happened.
That show for its time
for
frame,
the last 20, 30 years.
If you look at that show again now, it's short of some of the cheesy effects. Some of the effects were way ahead of its own time. So
and it's interesting, the craft glows a reddish orange color, which was my secret report for the Navy, going to the Chief of Naval Operations, glowing reddish orange, coincidentally.
Isn't it interesting too that how the TV shows of science fiction from the early 60s migrated from saucer-shaped craft, which you had the saucer section of the Enterprise, you had the Invaders style round spacecraft, you had this island Earth had a cylindrical spacecraft, you had Forbidden Planet had a cylindrical anti-gravity spacecraft. All that science fiction later went on to become a lot of rocket powered stuff. They dumbed it down. The science fiction kind of got dumbed down.
Well, now look at all the different shapes and sizes that UFOs come in. It's not just a rectangle, a triangle or a saucer. You got spheres.
True, cigar-shaped.
You got cigar-shaped craft.
Right,
you have flat rectangles. Weird
Anything
shapes
goes
that
now.
you would never think would actually be, but yet they
Who was it? Was it Clifford Stone that talked about the story? Was he the one that did Crash and Retrieval?
Yeah, and he recently updated the story.
He did the story.
57 species. He said it's now 400.
Have you heard about the story that he tells about where he's been asked to come in and evaluate this craft, and he says it's essentially a living being?
Yeah. He actually invited me. He says he took a piece of one of the craft from a crash in 73, and he already said this on my show. He said he buried it, near his house, because if he had it in his possession, they would have taken it. And he invited me to come check it out. He said that every time someone holds it, they get the feeling that it's alive. It literally is a living and breathing.
We have
not
so
a living
much
and
to learn.
breathing thing, but it's a symbiotic piece of
we
metal.
think we're so advanced, but we are
That's
so
been
far
reported multiple times from multiple witnesses. Yeah, that it's a living interface.
That's right.
And that's what David Adair said too when he was at Area 51. He was taken in to look at this craft that had a hole in it blown out from the inside. When he put his hands on it, it changed color and it changed form a little bit, and he had mental images coming from it. So it was alive, he thought.
And they also have the kind that had the skin that, as you touched it, it was kind of like you could almost go through it, but it was kind of a weird. Just some of this stuff is just so out there. It's just difficult to wrap your mind around.
Well, you can imagine in the last 100 years how much we've evolved. Just imagine 1,000 years.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Or another 100 years from now.
If we don't blow ourselves up first.
True.
Right.
But just look at it seems to me like from 1850 to say 850 AD to 1850, we really didn't evolve that much, especially with technology. Almost nothing new came out. Sure, you have,
advanced horse and buggy,
right? And then all of a sudden, comes the 20th century, we get the first manned regular flight, with the Wright brothers.
Oh, I meant to ask you about
60
Spence.
years later, we're, on the moon.
I meant to ask you about that guy Spence. Did you ask him about that guy that he talked about the story about the ET that came during the 1900s, early 1900s, and visited a community and was parlaying information, was just trying to help, and it was.
I did ask him, and he does. I don't think that was
that
him.
one? That wasn't him. Okay.
No. But he was talking about a new abductee, or not a new abductee, a new contactee that was around the George Adamski period, named George William Hunt, something like that.
I think we need another hour, so there's probably going to be part 2 and maybe part 3.
Easily. We should do a part 2. There's so much more to talk about on all this.
Like that.
Yeah, I
absolutely.
Agree.
Because somebody actually, Dan, in response to some of the things you were saying, somebody said that some of the atrocities are actually going on in plain sight in Antarctica.
Really? I understand they're doing human experimentation. Dr. Michael Salla did a really good book on Antarctica and the secret space program, and they basically some of the German companies like Siemens were actually using slave labor during World War II. They moved all their operations down there, and there's no oversight. So
it's supposed to be a neutral zone. That's why there's no oversight. It's
all military.
Yeah,
and mostly NSA, CIA, a lot of that, and then the scientists that are down there, part of the National Science Foundation, which I was going to work for down there in communication.
Well, let's just say any one of us wanted to get to Antarctica. What are we going to book a flight down there? No, we got to get permits. You got to get.
Wait a minute, there was a YouTuber. There was a YouTuber recently. It wasn't PewDiePie. It was one of these guys that were right up at the top. Said he was going to go to Antarctica to see if there was the ice wall there for the flat Earth.
Yes. His name was. He goes by Matt Powers. Yes.
Is that who it was? Yeah, I don't remember,
Matt
but I remember
Powers.
it was his goal. I'm thinking, okay,
he's trying to raise 60,000 or more to.
No, it's going to cost him more than that. Yeah,
I'm sure it is. Yeah. I know the minimum is that, but that's
all the PSYOP programs that the CIA's been doing. Even going back to the 50s. When Alan Dulles was kind of back in the 50s, saucers with Adamski and all that. He was warning the people off, the scientists who were trying to disprove or look into it. The flat Earth is just another CIA PSYOP, to see how easily people can be manipulated and fooled. And then what happens is that you have credible researchers, and then what they do is with the mainstream media, they'll lump it together with, and the flat Earth people, and so the average person, the intelligent person, looks at it and it totally trashes it in their mind.
Well, Netflix, for them to actually fund a documentary on that, I thought was just wow. But at the same time, half of that documentary, Behind the Curve of Flat Earth, was people from JPL saying these people are, full of it, basically. So they showed how
they're
it's
just
impossible.
victims. They're victims of an inadequate educational systems that, regardless of whether you believe in public school or not, or whatever, I don't care. As a society, have we done enough to instruct our kids and really raise them with information they can use to make rational, critical thinking? And we haven't. We failed.
No, we have. We absolutely failed. And you know what? Having linear thought and having linear school, meaning where everybody has to take the same courses, it's not really good. What you should do is each child, if they're good at math and sciences, well, then nurture that. If they're good in the arts and music, well, then nurture that.
More magnet
focus
schools,
on what they're good at.
They don't want to,
focus
but that's
on what they're bad at.
But the educational funding has been stripped. It's been relegated to, I guess we need to put some money into that, instead of a priority. And also, I remember growing up, there were music programs. You hear about a lot of schools have slashed what they think are frivolous arts programs, and people are not growing up with a rounded education at all. They just get
I agree.
Can't even use I learned how to count change back as a cashier when I was 16. You counted it back manually. There was no calculator. There was no receipt. There was no
same
nothing.
thing with me when I
Counted
worked
it
at my
back.
father's restaurant, 9 years old. I
Yeah.
actually was, catching some of the waitresses' mistakes, on their
And once you learn how to do it,
tickets.
it's really quite simple. It's not complicated at all.
No,
But now isn't anybody I've ever been to any place that knows how to count change back.
No, because it's all done for them.
It says it owes you $7.67. Here's your $7.67.
There you go. Yeah.
It could be totally wrong. They don't know.
That's right.
It seems to me too that every week now there's coming out new information. So let's plan on doing one of these symposiums right here next month.
I
Okay.
agree.
Let's do that.
I agree too.
Definitely. Yeah, we've gone a little over now. We're a little over, which is great. This has been a great show. One of our best.
We'll go much deeper next time.
Yes.
I'm doing a little bit of quite a bit of research actually.
We want to get that report from you too, Dan, about the Delaware camera too. That
it's on my list.
It's on his to-do list.
That is going to be a fascinating piece of information when you get it out. I think it's really important, Dan. So more power.
It's on my list. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
You guys are amazing. The chat room is amazing. Do go back and check out the chat room, guys. Because
I was able to see.
I'm looking at it. Yeah.
Plug my show in it right now.
Everything's really awesome.
Dan, if you want to put anybody wants to type in a URL or anything like that, absolutely.
No web addresses are allowed. That's
okay. So I'll type it in there.
Oh,
okay.
Dr. J Radio. Dr. J Radio.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Dr.
Yeah.
Really good. Really good.
And then
throw in webmatrix.net.
Thank you, Mark.
My notes.
Webmatrix.net, Dan, is that what it is?
Uh-huh.
Okay, we got you in there. Okay, great. And then we are broadcastteamalpha.com. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, John. Thank you, guys, and Aage, Nori, guys. This has been great. I love these kind of shows because you draw on what you know and you bring some
learn.
Learn. Absolutely. So, I'm utterly fascinated the way you guys retain these date and time, just like encyclopedia of UFOlogy, both of you, with your ability to recall these date and time. That's so important because, as the net gets censored, it's like, no, wait a minute now. We got a guy that knows.
Remember it.
You guys know there's a social memory complex. So it's good that you guys are out there doing what you do. And
secrecy perpetuates and disclosure transforms.
Absolutely. True. All right, with that, I'm going to hit the go button here. And
we
love you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
See you tomorrow.